A story is like a river. And just like how a river picks up the hues of the earth and the fragrance of the flora through which it flows, a story too gets colored by the imagination and scented by the word skills of the person who is telling the story. And so, thus it is with today's story as well. Born out of the wisdom of my friend, of course, but colored, adorned, bedecked, bejeweled, and ornamented by my imagination and my words. So, here it is, the fable of the red flower and her 5 grooms, and hence my costume. Once, on the side of the high mountain, there reigned a king. One beautiful day, his queen gave birth to a beautiful red flower baby. Was the day beautiful because this beauty was born? Or was this beauty beautiful because she was born on a beautiful day? One will never know. But the fact remained that she was a beautifully unique baby. For although she was red flower, her reds had variegated hues in them. Maroon, magenta, crimson, orange, pink, burgundy, scarlet, vermilion, all with a coppery sheen. So, the wonderstruck parents decided to name her Chitrapushpa, which means multicolored blossom. Chitrapushpa became known around her kingdom for her extraordinary grace, beauty, intelligence, devotion, and purity of character. For she was a child of history that stretched over thousands of years. When asked how she had come to be this way, she only smiled and moved into a beguiling dance that refreshed and renewed everyone. And this is how I think this red flower maiden danced. Let's try it. தொட்டால் பூமலரும் தொடாமல் இவள் மலர்ந்தாள் சுட்டால் பொன் சிவக்கும் சுடாமல் இதழ் சிவந்தாள் தொட்டால் பூமலரும் தொடாமல் இவள் மலர்ந்தாள் சுட்டால் பொன் சிவக்கும் சுடாமல் இதழ் சிவந்தாள். How about that? So, when Chitrapushpa reached the age of marriage, the news of her beauty and wisdom had spread far across rivers and deserts and forests and hills and villages near and distant. Day after day, suitors arrived and petitioned her parents for her hand. Finally, her parents narrowed the list of suitors down to the sons of the 5 royal dynasties: fire, wind, earth, water, and ether. It was decided that each contender would compete through a dance, and her parents would eliminate a contender until the blessed one was at last revealed. Everyone stood in rapture as the competition began. The son from the royal house of fire was the first to enter. And as he entered, he set the entire hall and the surrounding land ablaze with his flames and his heat and his fervor. Some people fled the scene. So ferocious was his demonstration. When he finished his display, he bowed low before Chitrapushpa's parents, just knowing that he would be chosen. he cast his gaze at the flower. But the flower maiden cast her gaze at the floor. That is, until all of the doors and windows of the palace swung open, and the curtains of silks and chiffons whished and swished and billowed as big as the rain clouds. And the heat that fire had created in the room suddenly dispersed with the arrival of the son of wind. The dance of the wind was pure magic, for he made himself felt on the surface of one's entire body. Now it was heavy, pressure pushing dangerously, and now it was soft, most featherly touch brushing against one's ear. He was everywhere, all around, and could easily keep you spinning joyously. Swift, slow, soft, hard, quite noisy was the dance of the son of wind. And then, with one gigantic gush, he dropped into absolute and total stillness. He bowed low and sought the eye of Chitrapushpa. But she gazed at the floor. That is, until that very floor and the ground beneath that floor began trembling as the son of earth entered the room. Each step of his dance was solid and firm, and what steps they were, you knew. You just knew that you could build the grandest palace ever, and he would support it effortlessly. He was simultaneously rock and rich soil. He was sand and he was mud. He was prized gem and he was plain pebbles. Without even uttering a word, he seemed to say, I am safety and security. Surely you could not place your daughter in better hands. He looked at Chitrapushpa, but she cast her gaze at the floor. That is, until everyone started feeling their hair and their clothes getting wet. What is this? Had the son of the wind ripped the roof away, that the clouds were showering them? They looked up, but the roof was still there. Had the son of the earth tore open the ground beneath them, that the waters below the soil have begun to gush up? They looked down, but the earth was still there. In fact, they were standing on it. Then, who could be doing this? It was the son of water, introducing himself dramatically. He sprayed and sprinkled his waters, scented with sandalwood from Mysore, jasmine from Madurai, roses from Chandigarh, parijat from West Bengal, and Brahma Kamal from Uttarakhand. The perfumed mist enveloped the room, exhilarating all who had gathered. The sounds that water made as he danced was the poetry of small streams over blue rocks, of crashing ocean waves, and of the tinkle of fountains in the temple garden. Then suddenly he ended with a hint of distant thunderstorm and one astonishing flash of lightning. And everyone inhaled the scent of a new fresh beginning. He bowed low and he extended his hand in a grand gesture towards Chitrapushpa. But what did she do? She cast her gaze at the floor. The crowd erupted into a huge cheer. Surely now the parents would stop the proceedings and make a choice. After all, who could offer better dance than this? In their anxious excitement, no one even noticed the emptiness, the elegant emptiness of the son of ether. Only a few who were keenly aware noticed that something had shifted in their breath or not shifted. Something had been filled or drained. How can one describe the dance of ether? It felt as though you were inside his dance and his dance was inside of you. When the son of ether finished his dance, he did not bow, nor did he extend his hand towards Chitrapushpa. Or maybe he did. Well, only he would know. He seemed to just vanish. But those who were keenly aware knew that he was still in the room. Not just in the expansiveness of the royal court, but in the nooks and crannies, behind the pillars, under the seats, and even inside the box in which the queen kept her beetles to chew after dinner. Yes, he was just everywhere, the son of ether. The time had now come for elimination. Everyone held their breath. It was fire who had given the first dance. Remember? Maybe you don't. But the king sure did. He remembered the heat and the flames and the number of times he had to wring his silk scarf which had gotten drenched with his own sweat. He did not want that kind of a companion for his daughter. Oh no, not one that would make her wring her silk scarf that would get drenched with her own sweat. No siree. So he simply turned to the son of fire and said, "You are dismissed." Everyone was surprised, and their surprise turned to shock when Chitrapushpa stood up and cried out, "No, father, no, you cannot dismiss fire. You simply cannot." Even though the king loved his daughter, he quickly reminded himself of the number of times he had to wring his silk scarf that had gotten drenched with his own sweat. So he firmed himself up and said in the strictest of tones, "I am sorry, but the elimination process must go forward. My child, he has to go." "No, no, no," said Chitrapushpa with equal firmness, for after all, she was his daughter. "What reason can you give me for this request?" asked the father. "A most important one indeed. Without fire, there would be no heat to dry my seed pod, that it may finally break and release the seeds to begin the next generation. What more important reason could there be?" The father saw her point, and after conferring with his wife, he turned and he knew exactly what to do. He looked at Wind, who was dancer number 2, and said, "You are dismissed." Everyone nodded and murmured, but their murmurs turned to gasps when Chitrapushpa stood up and cried out, "No, father, no, you cannot dismiss Wind. You simply cannot." People were startled. The mother was dumbfounded, and the father too astonished to even ask for a reason. Knowing that she had given everybody the heebie-jeebies with this strange request, Chitrapushpa herself continued, "Without Wind, who would transport my seeds to new fertile grounds where they may root and grow and add glory to their grandfather?" This was most unusual, but the father saw the validity of this truth, and so he decided to let the son of Wind stay. However, with a nod from his wife, he bellowed out, "Earth, you are dismissed." Now the crowd surged forward with great rumble, but they became transfixed in their tracks when Chitrapushpa stood up and cried out, "No, father, no, you cannot dismiss Earth. You simply cannot." The father became exasperated, and the mother Oh, the mother was getting embarrassed. 2 grooms for 1 bride was peculiar enough. But hey, at least you can say 2 is company, but 3 is a crowd. So, this time it was she who spoke. Nonsense! This I cannot allow, she said. But Chitrapushpa was not one to be shushed so easily. Because you see, she was the child of history that stretched over thousands of years. Such people have wisdom, and wisdom has a visionary quality to it. It is not conditioned by meekness and fear of what would people say, what would people think. So, Chitrapushpa spoke. Without earth, who will cradle and protect my seed until it begins to grow? And who will hold my roots firm that they might gather food from the soil? This was the truth. And truth has a way of sending shivers of awakening, and so it did to the mother. The crowd fell into deep silence when the father arose and spoke these words. Earth, you might stay. Now, everyone noticed that water seemed a bit nervous, and they knew ether would be too, because you see, they couldn't see ether, and so they couldn't say for sure, but they knew. By now, the father was somewhat abashed to utter any grand words, and so he silently raised his hands, pointed to the son of water, and gestured, "Leave, go." By this time, the crowd thought it was all a royal game, and was not the least bit surprised when Chitrapushpa stood up and cried out, "No, father, no, you cannot dismiss water. You simply cannot." This time, she did not wait for her mother or her father, or her uncles or her aunties, or her cousins or her friends to ask her any questions. She continued herself. Once my seed is in the earth, it is moisture that breaks the shell, and it is water that nourishes the stems and the leaves of my children forever. Water, you shall stay. The parents and everyone gathered were struck with wonderment at the vision and wisdom of their young princess. The father spoke, and this time with pride. Fire, water, earth, wind may stay, and we shall have a grand wedding. But, and there is always a but to these things, you know. So he said, but we must keep our word before our subjects. We promised an elimination there shall be. With these words, the parents both stamped their feet mightily, and before anyone could knew what was happening, the guards seized the son of ether, or what they thought was the son of ether, because he was invisible, you see, and dragged him away from the room. The crowd turned their head in unison towards Chitrapushpa, expecting her to stand up. And stand up she did, but this time she did not speak. She screamed and screamed, begged for ether to stay, but her parents shut and bolted the door behind ether, and that was that. Fire, wind, earth, water gathered around to comfort Chitrapushpa, but her cries and wails could be heard throughout the village and deep into the dark night. Soon, Chitrapushpa was united with her 4 grooms in a ceremony with rapturous celebrations. A year passed, and the red flower maiden presented no seed. And then another, and another, and another. The truth, however, that no one dared to speak was that no seeds were being produced anywhere in the land. There were whispers that were passed between the people of the kingdom, and the flower maiden had cast an evil spell on the kingdom. The thing with whispers is this: They start out softly, but soon they grow and grow and grow into an echo that sounds and resounds. And so did this whisper. And when its echo reached the ears of the royal parents, they were distraught, dismayed, distressed, and all the disses in the dictionary. They sent for their precious daughter to ask for an explanation. Chitrapushpa arrived. Her reds were not as red as they used to be. She had grown a little pale, and she began to speak. Beloved father and mother, you made a grave error when you sent away ether, fire. When you sent away ether. Fire, wind, water are all necessary. Yes, but because ether was invisible, you failed to understand that he held the key to all, for we all exist in ether. Moreover, none can thrive without the participation of all things in nature. And so, the awesomeness of oneness was revealed to the kingdom by the young red flower maiden. But the story doesn't stop there. I mean, what kind of happy ending would that be? The son of ether was called back and was united with Chitrapushpa. And to this day, the dance of celebration continues in nature. So, the next time you step into your garden and look at the red and the yellow and the pink and the purple flowers dancing in the wind, remember how they got there. And also remember where you heard about it first, right here on Logon Ka Folklore, edition 3, from your friendly neighborhood storyteller, Ramaa Bharadvaj. So now, that's the end of the story. But there is an epilogue to this story. I like this story because it speaks of the interconnectedness of the 5 elements, which are significant not only in nature, but also in relation to the physical and spiritual aspects of the human body. The science of Ayurveda focuses on creating a healthy body and mind through balancing the 5 elements in our bodies through food and personal habits. You see these 5 fingers? They represent the 5 elements: fire, air, space, earth, and water. By connecting them at the tips or the base in multiple combinations, mudras can be created for healing various ailments in the body, says the science of Mudra Vigyan. When it comes to spiritual ascension, Tantra Shastra speaks of the energy vortexes called chakras within the subtle realm of the human body, each representing one of the 5 elements. So you see, this was not just a flippant tale. Now, I leave you with this thought. Did you know that in Sanskrit, there is a word for the dead, Katavashesha? It means one of whom nothing is left except his story. What story about ourselves are we going to leave behind? What kind of Katavashesha are we going to become? Think. Thank you, Folklore and British Council India, for inviting me, and to all of you for joining me. Soon, I hope to be able to share more stories in a live performance in a village, city, town, or country near you. Until then, imagine your life into a beautiful story. Vanakkam.